Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Elira Cross didn't mean to steal anything. She thought the pup was hurt, alone in the ditch beside Low Lantern Road, shaking under a broken fence post. The rain had soaked its fur, and when she picked it up, she felt the tiny heartbeat fluttering like it was begging her not to leave it behind. But now she stood on her knees in the mud behind her cabin, her hands tied with rough rope, face bleeding from where she hit the ground. A man loomed over her. No, not a man. Something bigger, darker. His eyes glowed faint gold, not normal gold, but burning, like metal pulled fresh from a forge. "You took what's mine," he growled, voice harsh and layered, like two voices speaking at once. Elira cried out, trying to explain, but the ropes bit deeper. The rain had stopped, and in the sudden silence of night, she heard the soft whimper of the pup she'd tried to protect. Ravik Thornsent had come to kill her. That was the plan. Punish the human who dared touch Frostvale blood. His pack rules were clear. No human interference. No human hands on a pup. Ever. When he dragged her into the mud, he fully meant to snap her neck in seconds. A clean break. No suffering. But then, the scent. It hit him with brutal force, knocking reason out of his mind. Sweet, warm, maddeningly familiar. Not perfume. Not fear. This was fate scent. Mate scent. Impossible. Forbidden. Wrong. He stepped back, chest tightening as though something ancient had punched through his ribs. His wolf snarled within, not with rage, but recognition. The pup, Bryn squeaked, pushing its nose against Elira's boot, as if pleading for something. Ravik blinked hard, because every instinct demanded he protect the girl he came to destroy. Elira coughed rainwater, trying to see him through her tangled hair. He looked wild, black hair dripping, shoulders massive beneath a torn jacket that looked half animal hide, half soldier gear. His hands were huge, fingers tipped with claws he hadn't bothered to hide. "Please," Elira whispered. "I didn't steal him. I found him." Her voice cracked, thin and terrified, but steady enough to sound truthful. Ravik hated that it shook him. Humans lied. Humans killed wolves in secret and trapped lone pups for bounty money. He'd buried too many young wolves because of human cruelty. But her heartbeat, he could hear it. Too honest, too scared, too real. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. Her eyes were gray, no, storm-colored, shifting with the light. A pulse of heat shot through his chest so fast it scared him more than anger ever had. Thunder rolled low across the hills, and somewhere far off, a wolf howled, signaling, "Alert." Ravik's head snapped toward the sound, and in that second, Elira saw his pupils shift, narrow, flare like molten metal. He untied the rope roughly, almost shoving her as he yanked her back to her feet. "You shouldn't exist," he muttered, voice strained like a man arguing with himself. "I should kill you." Elira shook, hugging her arms around her chest, wet shirt clinging to her skin, breath coming in short bursts. "Then why don't you?" she asked, not bravely but desperately, because she'd rather die on her feet than beg. Ravik stared at her like she was a puzzle carved from stone. "Your scent," he said almost to himself. "It lies." He lifted Bryn gently, and the pup wagged its tail, licking his thumb. Elira watched in shock. This beast could be gentle? Headlights swept across the trees suddenly, flashing through the pines before cutting out. Someone else was coming down Low Lantern Road. Ravik cursed under his breath. "If another wolf sees you with him, you're dead before sunrise." Elira's mind raced. Wolves? Sunrise? What world had she stepped into? He grabbed her wrist, not soft, not cruel, just urgent. "You're coming with me," he said. I don't want to go, she snapped, fear pushing her words out without thought. Ravik's jaw tightened. That, he growled quietly, isn't a choice. Bryn barked once, sharp, urgent. In the forest behind them, a branch snapped heavy. Ravik turned, nostrils flaring, eyes blazing. Run, he said, tugging her into the darkness. Something else scented you first. The last thing Elira heard before the woods swallowed them was a voice, low and hungry, whispering from the trees. She has the pup. Take the human. The punishment had just begun. They ran through Frostvale timberlands until Elira couldn't breathe. Ravik didn't slow, dragging her through brambles and fog, Bryn tucked under one arm. Elira stumbled, scraped, gasping for air as branches slapped her face and mud soaked her jeans. Behind them, something followed. Heavy, confident steps, snapping twigs like bones. Ravik halted suddenly, pulling her behind a fallen cedar trunk. His breath came out in sharp clouds, eyes burning bright in the dark. Don't speak, he whispered. Elira nodded, trembling so hard she thought her teeth would break. A shadow moved across the clearing, tall and wrong. Not human, not wolf. Something in between, sniffing the air with ugly hunger. Bryn whined softly. Elira covered the pup's muzzle gently. The creature paused. Elira's heart pounded so loudly she swore it could hear. Then, slowly, it turned away and melted into the trees as though the forest swallowed it whole. Ravik released a breath he'd been holding. That was Caro Flint, he muttered. He scented you. Elira stared at him, breath shaking. What does that mean? Ravik didn't answer immediately. Instead, he focused on Bryn, checking his paws, his fur, like a parent inspecting a child after a fall. Elira expected him to yell, to blame her, but his hands shook. Barely, but enough. It means, he finally said, voice low and tight, you're now marked by a rival. Elira didn't understand much. Only that word, marked, stabbed fear into her ribs. Ravik looked at her, frustration and confusion twisting his expression. Humans aren't supposed to carry scent bonds. Elira blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not part of your world. Ravik stood up abruptly. You are now. In the distance, another howl split the night. Not warning. Claiming. Elira tried to stand, but her ankle twisted under her weight. Pain shot through her leg and she fell to her knees. Ravik crouched beside her, almost annoyed at himself for caring. You're injured, he said sharply. No kidding, Elira hissed, holding her ankle. Ravik placed his hand above her boot, and Elira jerked away, but he growled softly, not threatening, more like a command. Warmth spread through his palm, surprisingly gentle. A strange tingling sensation crawled up her leg, hot, then cold, then soft. Elira gasped as the pain faded down to a dull ache. What did you just do? She breathed. Ravik didn't look at her. Minor healing, don't run on it. Elira stared at him, stunned. He could have killed her. He could still kill her. Instead, he healed her. Why? Bryn nudged her hand with his wet nose, tail wagging softly as though trying to calm her shaking fingers. They walked slower now, moving through old pine needles and patches of mist until they reached an abandoned stone bridge over a creek. Ravik stopped, scanning the surroundings before speaking again. Caro will hunt you, he said quietly. Not tonight, but soon. Elira leaned against the bridge, exhaustion settling in. Why? I didn't do anything. Ravik almost laughed, but it came out bitter. You touched a pup. Elira looked down at Bryn, small and soft, with mottled gray fur. I was trying to save him, she whispered. Ravik's gaze softened for a second, a flicker of something human. I know. Elira met his eyes, suddenly angry. Then why were you going to punish me? Ravik stepped closer, his presence overwhelming but oddly grounding. Because the law demands it, he said. I can't show weakness. Elira scoffed. So killing people is what strength means to you? Ravik's jaw tightened. No, protecting the pack is. A cold wind blew across the bridge, carrying pine scent and distant thunder. Ravik glanced toward the deeper woods. We can't stay here? Elira swallowed. Where are we going? Ravik looked at Bryn, then at her again, longer this time. Somewhere safe, somewhere hidden. Elira hesitated. Why hide me if I'm a problem for you? Ravik stepped closer, his voice dangerously soft. Because your scent is binding. Elira frowned. Binding how? Ravik's eyes met hers, and the weight of something ancient pulsed between them. Mate scent, he said like a confession he hated. Elira shook her head. That's impossible. Ravik gave a humorless smile. That's what I thought. Before she could speak again, wet leaves crackled behind them, followed by a growl. Low, hungry, close. Ravik turned slowly, muscles coiling, eyes burning gold. Caro Flint had returned, and this time, he wasn't alone. The forest thickened around them, darkness clinging to every tree like wet cloth. Elira stumbled through the underbrush, Bryn clutched in her arms, heart hammering so violently it felt like it might tear through her chest. Ravik moved beside her silently, powerful and fluid, a predator in every sense, yet strangely protective. Every snapped twig, every distant rustle made him tense like a coiled spring. Elira tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but words lodged in her throat. Her lungs burned and the cold wind whipped her hair across her face, sticking it to her wet cheeks. Keep moving, Ravik muttered, voice low and sharp. Elira didn't argue. She could see the golden glow of his eyes cutting through the night, guiding them like a living torch. Somewhere far ahead, Caro Flint prowled, hunting, smelling, seeking to claim the pup they carried. Fear tore at her, but beneath it, an odd pulse of curiosity. Why did Ravik hesitate to strike? Why had he healed her? Elira swallowed hard, her throat dry. Something unspoken hummed between them, thick as the fog curling around their legs. Ravik's senses were alive, alert to every movement, every scent. Elira smelled the earth, the wet pine, and then herself. How she trembled, how her scent throbbed with something primal. He tried to fight it, tried to focus on the threat, but the bond was undeniable. Her pulse raced in tandem with the pup's, a fragile trio of life in the blackened woods. Listen, he whispered suddenly, halting her mid-step. Elira froze, listening. A twig cracked, soft but deliberate. Not a deer, not the wind. A low growl followed, vibrating through the ground like warning. Elira's stomach knotted. Ravik's lips twitched, revealing just a hint of teeth. Caro is close, too close. Bryn whimpered, ears flattened, sensing the tension that wrapped around them like a vice. Ravik's hand brushed against Elira's back, not gentle, but possessive. Stay behind me, he ordered. Her breath caught. Behind him, she felt both safe and exposed, small in the presence of this magnificent, terrifying creature. They moved deeper, following the narrow trail that wound between gnarled trees and thick moss. Elira's wet shoes sank into the soft earth, pulling at her, slowing her. I can't keep up, she admitted, voice trembling. Ravik's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before hardening. You will, he said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Elira shivered, realizing he meant it. Not a suggestion, not a command she could refuse. An inevitability. Bryn squirmed, restless, whining softly. Elira hugged him tighter, feeling the warmth of the tiny life against her chest. Ravik's gaze flicked between them constantly, ears pricked, nose twitching, sensing danger no human could perceive. Elira couldn't read him. Anger, concern, something deeper? She could only feel the pull in her chest, the impossible draw of something larger than herself. Her heartbeat matched Bryn's, her fear, and something she didn't understand. The echo of his presence. Suddenly, the forest floor dropped sharply, revealing a hidden ravine shrouded in fog. Ravik stopped at the edge, crouching low, eyes scanning the shadows below. Elira gasped at the drop, clutching Bryn tighter. "Is this," she began, voice faltering, "safe?" Ravik didn't answer immediately. Instead, he traced the ridgeline with his gaze, nostrils flaring, jaw tight. "It's hidden. They won't find us here." Elira hesitated, then followed him to a narrow ledge lined with roots. Every step was precarious, mud slick beneath their shoes. Her heart thudded violently, nearly deafening her, as if warning her of the fall. Ravik didn't look back, but extended a hand, not touching her, but close enough for her to instinctively reach. When she did, his golden gaze locked with hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Elira's mind spun. Something dangerous and forbidden pulsed between them, stronger than fear, stronger than instinct. The fog rolled thick, swallowing the trees behind them, hiding the forest in a gray haze. Elira crouched beside Ravik, knees aching, back pressed against cold stone. Bryn nestled at her feet, trembling. From below, the snap of branches returned. Caro Flint was circling, hunting, testing. Ravik's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a claim she didn't yet understand. "He'll try again," Ravik murmured, voice heavy. Elira swallowed. "What if he catches us?" Ravik's gaze flicked downward to the ravine's edge, then back to her. "He won't. Not while I'm here. Not while I know you're mine." Elira froze, the words sinking in, heavy and impossible. Her pulse raced, not just from fear anymore, but from a pull she couldn't resist. She wanted to argue, to run, to deny it. But even as she opened her mouth, the bond throbbed in her chest, echoing in Bryn's heartbeat. The shadows shifted, the forest hummed, and Elira knew she had entered a world where nothing was as simple as survival. A sudden movement drew their attention. A flicker in the fog, a dark shape descending the slope. Caro's eyes glinted like cold steel, his posture rigid, ready to strike. Ravik shifted in front of Elira, muscles coiling, breath slow and controlled, tail flicking in tension, wolf instincts sharpening every sense. Elira hugged Bryn close, mouth dry, stomach twisted in fear and fascination. The alpha's power radiated like heat, undeniable, terrifying, magnetic. Elira's own heartbeat thrummed against her chest, echoing with the rhythm of the wild around her. She realized she wasn't just hiding. She was marked, chosen, pulled into something larger than herself, and she didn't yet know whether it would save her or destroy her. Ravik led Elira down a narrow, hidden trail that twisted between ancient trees, roots curling like serpents beneath their feet. The fog hung thick in the air, dampening sound and softening shadows, as if the forest itself conspired to hide them. Elira's muscles ached from hours of running, her breath shallow and uneven, yet she forced herself to keep pace. Bryn, the pup, squirmed occasionally, nuzzling her chest and whimpering softly, his small heartbeat a fragile rhythm against her own. Ravik moved with fluid precision, eyes scanning every movement, ears twitching to catch even the faintest whisper of sound. Elira's mind reeled. She had thought wolves were just stories, creatures of fairy tales and old warnings, but the living, breathing predator beside her, protective and terrifying, was proof they existed. And worse, he knew her scent. Something deep inside her had shifted when she first touched Bryn, and now every step into Frostvale timberlands made it impossible to ignore. The trail opened onto a small clearing she hadn't noticed before, bathed in pale moonlight. In the center, a structure rose, simple, built of stones and timber, but emanating warmth and safety. Smoke curled from a chimney, scenting the air with herbs and pine. Ravik paused at the edge, lowering Bryn gently. "This is Tavra Elwyn's sanctuary," he murmured, voice low, almost reverent. Elira tilted her head. "Sanctuary?" she echoed. "Is it safe?" Ravik didn't answer directly, only scanned the surrounding woods for threats, body coiled like a spring ready to strike. Bryn padded forward, sniffing the entrance, tail wagging hesitantly. Elira followed, stepping lightly over mossy stones. She didn't know if she should feel hope or dread, only that this place radiated a strange calm, as though the forest itself approved of its existence. Her fingers traced the rough stone walls as she approached the door, heart hammering with both fear and curiosity. Inside, the sanctuary smelled of herbs, dried flowers, and the lingering warmth of animals. Small cages and nests lined the walls, each occupied by creatures of the forest. Some she recognized, some she didn't. Elira's eyes widened. You live here?" she asked softly, voice barely above a whisper. Ravik's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes softened slightly. "Tavra watches over the pack. She heals, protects, guides." Bryn padded to a small mat near the hearth, curling into a ball as if he understood instinctively they were safe. Elira sank onto a bench near the fireplace, exhaustion and relief washing over her in equal measure. She hadn't realized how tense her muscles were until she could finally relax them. Ravik removed his jacket, water dripping from dark fur, and hung it over a hook, eyes never leaving her. Elira felt an odd pull, a magnetic tension she couldn't name. He had come to punish her, meant to harm her. But now, here, in this quiet sanctuary, the same hands that could destroy were also guardians. She didn't understand it. She wasn't supposed to understand it. Tavra Elwyn appeared from a shadowed doorway, small and wiry, eyes sharp like a hawk, yet softened by age. Her hair was streaked with silver and green, entwined with leaves as if part of the forest itself. "Ravik," she said softly, but her gaze shifted immediately to Elira, nose twitching. Elira flinched. She can smell me?" she whispered. Ravik's jaw tightened. "Yes, she knows what I know." Tavra studied her silently, then reached forward, brushing a hand over Elira's arm. "A binding?" she said quietly. Elira froze. What?" Tavra's eyes glimmered knowingly. "The scent of a mate. You carry it, child. It's undeniable." Elira's stomach twisted. "Mate? But I'm human." Ravik's golden eyes flicked to hers, shadowed and fierce. "Not just human. Mine." Elira's pulse hammered, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and a strange, impossible longing. She wanted to flee, to deny, but every instinct told her she couldn't. Bryn whimpered, nudging her hand, as if confirming that even the pup felt the shift. Something ancient hummed beneath the words, binding her closer than she had ever imagined possible. Ravik moved to the hearth, hands brushing over the small flames, his gaze distant yet alert. "Caro Flint won't stop," he said softly, voice tight. "He'll circle, test, probe, and if he finds you..." Elira's breath caught. "If he finds me?" She couldn't finish the thought. Ravik's shoulders stiffened, eyes narrowing. "He'll take Bryn and hurt you to break me. That's how he operates." Elira's fingers clenched in her lap. "Then what do we do?" Ravik turned toward her, expression unreadable but voice low, firm. "We survive, we hide, and you learn to trust, to bond, to be ready." Elira's head spun with questions. "Bond? Ready? Mate?" The words felt heavy, impossible, yet also compelling. Bryn barked softly, tail wagging in encouragement. Elira realized with a shiver she didn't fully understand that she was no longer just a human hiding in the woods. She was now part of a world she couldn't see, couldn't fully comprehend, and yet could not escape. The night stretched on, wind rattling the timbers of the sanctuary, leaves brushing against windows. Elira watched Ravik pacing, each step deliberate, wolf instincts visible in the fluid grace of his movements. He stopped occasionally, sniffing the air, ears twitching, then returned to pacing. Bryn slept, tiny body rising and falling with quiet breaths. Elira's mind whirled, trying to understand the impossible pull. She felt toward him. Her fear of him, of Caro, of the forest itself, mixed with an undeniable attraction she couldn't name. Ravik finally stopped, standing close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body. "Rest," he said simply. "You'll need your strength. Dawn brings danger." Elira nodded, exhaustion crashing over her, and curled up near Bryn on a blanket, Ravik watching like a silent sentinel. In the stillness, she realized the bond wasn't just scent or instinct. It was something deeper, more terrifying and beautiful than anything she had ever known. And she had no idea what it meant, yet. The first rays of dawn barely pierced the thick canopy of Frostvale timberlands, painting the forest floor in pale, trembling light. Elira stirred from a restless sleep, Bryn curled against her chest, warm and soft, while Ravik stood near the doorway, muscles taut, senses alert. His eyes flicked constantly to the edges of the sanctuary, nostrils flaring, ears twitching at every whisper of wind or rustle in the underbrush. Elira shivered under her soaked clothes, feeling the weight of the bond more acutely than ever. The scent that bound them pulsed in her chest, like a heartbeat she could not control, and the memory of Ravik's golden gaze haunted her even as she tried to move quietly. "He's coming?" Ravik murmured, almost to himself, and Elira's stomach dropped. The low growl of a wolf echoed from the distance, distant but deliberate, carrying with it a threat she could feel in her bones. "Caro Flint," Ravik said, voice flat and dangerous. "He knows exactly where we are." Elira tightened her hold on Bryn, fear and anticipation twisting inside her. Suddenly, the trees ahead erupted with movement. Caro Flint stepped into the clearing, his presence sharp and violent, fur bristling, eyes cold as iron. He circled the sanctuary, sniffing the air with calculated intent. Ravik stepped in front of Elira and Bryn, stance wide and unyielding, chest rising and falling in controlled strength. "You shouldn't have come here," Ravik growled, voice low and dangerous, vibrating with the power of his wolf. Caro snarled, a sound that made the ground seem to shiver, his claws scraping against the roots and rocks. Elira's hands trembled, but the pull of the bond tightened around her, anchoring her with impossible strength to Ravik. The pup whined softly, and Elira whispered, "Stay close." She had no idea what she could do to protect him, or herself. She only knew that the golden-eyed alpha standing before her was her anchor in a storm she had never imagined. The tension broke suddenly, a flurry of movement as Caro leapt toward them, teeth bared. Ravik reacted instantly, a blur of strength and precision, slamming Caro into the earth with a force that rattled Elira's chest. Bryn yipped and tried to wriggle free, but Elira held him tight, heart pounding in sync with the chaos. Sparks of instinct flared in. Ravik, his claws flashing, his growl vibrating through the clearing. Yet, despite the aggression, his movements were precise, protective, always returning to Elira and Bryn, as if their safety outweighed all else. Elira realized even through the terror that this wasn't just a fight. It was a display of power, dominance, and an unspoken promise. Her pulse throbbed against the bond that connected her to him, a heartbeat echoing through the chaos, pulling her closer, even as Caro struggled to rise against the alpha. Elira felt the air shift around her, thick with tension and the scent of wet fur and danger. Caro's attacks came faster, more desperate, each one a test of Ravik's patience and strength. Elira crouched low, instinctively shielding Bryn, watching Ravik move with the fluid grace of predator and protector intertwined. His golden eyes never left hers, a silent warning that she must remain still, trust him, and survive. Bryn whined again, pawing at Elira's arm, and she realized the pup sensed the danger too. "It's okay, Bryn," she whispered, voice trembling. "He's with us." Ravik's lips twitched at the words, a subtle acknowledgement she almost didn't notice. Then, with a sudden burst, Ravik launched Caro backward, claws grazing the earth, eyes blazing with a mix of fury and something deeper. Possessiveness, recognition, a claim that went beyond the physical fight. Elira's breath caught as she realized the alpha's instincts weren't just about defense. They were about ownership, about protecting what he now considered his. The fight ended abruptly when Caro skidded into the misty underbrush, snarling, retreating, but not defeated. Ravik remained where he was, chest heaving, eyes scanning for any sign of return. Elira exhaled shakily, Bryn curling against her, tail wagging weakly. "He'll come back," Ravik said quietly, almost to himself, and Elira's stomach clenched. "Then we'll be ready," she whispered, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Ravik turned to her slowly, golden eyes softening, the wolf within still coiled but restrained. "You need to understand," he said, voice low, almost intimate. "This is only the beginning. Your scent, your bond with Bryn, and now, with me, has marked you. You're not just human anymore. You're part of this world. Part of me." Elira's pulse raced at the words, warmth and fear intertwining as she realized the truth. Whatever lay ahead, danger, passion, and impossible loyalty had intertwined around her like the forest itself, and there was no turning back. The sanctuary felt smaller now, confined and alive with the tension that had followed them since the first attack. Elira crouched near the hearth, brushing wet hair from her face. Bryn pressed against her chest. Her fingers trembled as she traced the pup's soft fur, heart still racing from the morning fight. Ravik moved with quiet precision, eyes scanning the shadows beyond, the walls, ears twitching at every whisper of the forest. He carried Bryn in his arms now, muscles taut, every movement radiating control and latent danger. Elira couldn't stop noticing the way his gaze lingered on her, intense and unyielding, as if he could see through every fear, every secret she tried to hide. The pull of the bond tightened in her chest, impossible to ignore. It wasn't just his scent, or hers. It was a shared rhythm, like two halves of a heartbeat that refused separation. Elira shivered, not from cold, but from the awareness of being bound to a being she barely understood. Ravik finally set Bryn down on a soft mat near the fire, kneeling beside the pup to check for hidden injuries. "He's fine," Ravik said, voice low, but his eyes didn't leave Elira. "You did well. He trusts you." Elira blinked, taken aback. I just picked him up," she whispered. Ravik's lips twitched into what almost looked like a smile, though the tension in his body remained. "It's more than that. You've passed the first test. You didn't panic, you didn't hurt him, and you didn't freeze under pressure. That matters here." Elira swallowed hard, the weight of the forest, the pup and the alpha pressing down on her in ways she didn't yet fully comprehend. She realized that survival was only part of the story. Understanding Ravik, his instincts, and the bond that now tied them together was the other, far more dangerous part. Hours passed, the sanctuary settling into a fragile quiet. Elira watched Ravik move among herbs and tools Tavra had left out, repairing damage from the fight, preparing traps, and quietly ensuring their hiding place remained secure. Every movement was deliberate, every glance calculated, yet he stole small moments to look at her. Elira's pulse reacted to each glance, every subtle motion, as if the bond pulsed stronger whenever he was near. She felt a thrill of fear and fascination each time their eyes met, her thoughts spinning uncontrollably. She wanted to speak, to ask him about the bond, the scent, the strange draw she couldn't resist. But words failed her. Instead, she let the silence stretch, filled only by Bryn's soft breathing and the distant murmurs of the forest. She understood in that quiet that this connection wasn't temporary. It wasn't just about survival. It was something older, deeper, irrevocable. Ravik noticed her staring and finally spoke, voice low, deliberate. "You're not safe yet. Caro Flint won't forget this." Elira's stomach twisted. "Then what do we do?" she whispered. Ravik's golden eyes softened, though the edge remained sharp. "We adapt. You must learn the bond, understand it. Not just the scent, but the rhythm, the awareness. Bryn responds to it, and now so do you." Elira blinked. I don't know if I can." Ravik's hand brushed hers, lightly, almost brushing against the bond without touching the surface. "You already are," he said, almost a statement, almost a command. Elira felt heat flare through her, every instinct warning her, every heartbeat confirming it. She couldn't deny him. She couldn't deny herself. Her pulse quickened, Bryn whimpering softly as if sensing the sudden surge of energy. The Alpha's presence, his control, his power, was entwining with her own in ways she couldn't name. The afternoon sun faded, leaving the sanctuary in a wash of silver moonlight. Elira had moved closer to Ravik, curiosity overcoming fear. "Tell me about the bond," she asked, voice trembling. Ravik knelt beside her, gaze intense, holding hers. "It's more than scent," he said quietly. "It's awareness, instinct, connection. You feel what I feel, and I feel what you feel, even when we're apart. It's the pack. It's the pup. It's us." Elira's heart hammered. "Us?" she repeated. Ravik's hand hovered near hers, not quite touching, a whisper of warmth in the cool night air. "Yes," he said. "You're mine, and I'm bound to you, whether you understand it or not." Elira gasped softly, her mind a tangle of fear, disbelief, and an undeniable thrill. Bryn nuzzled her hand, as though confirming it. Somewhere in the shadows, a distant howl echoed, a warning from Caro Flint, reminding them that danger was never far. Yet, for the first time since this nightmare began, Elira didn't feel entirely alone. She felt claimed, tethered by something primal and unbreakable, and the realization both terrified and exhilarated her. Night deepened, carrying with it whispers of the forest and distant predators. Elira stayed close to Ravik, sensing his alertness even when he appeared calm. The bond pulsed steadily, a rhythm that neither Bryn nor she could escape. She understood, in a way she couldn't explain, that survival was no longer just about running, hiding, or protecting Bryn. It was about understanding this connection, learning to trust the Alpha who had come to punish her, yet now could not deny what fate had bound. The forest stretched endlessly beyond the sanctuary, shadows deepening, carrying secrets, threats, and the scent of a rival who would return. Elira realized she had entered a new existence, one of danger, desire, and an unshakable, binding connection. And as she drifted toward an uneasy sleep, she understood that nothing would ever be the same again. Dawn broke slowly over Frostvale timberlands, pale light filtering through the dense canopy. Elira awoke to the rhythmic sound of Ravik moving silently around the sanctuary, checking every corner, sniffing the air, ears twitching like a predator attuned to the faintest hint of danger. Bryn stirred beside her, small paws kneading her chest, tail flicking nervously. "Time to train," Ravik said, voice low but commanding. Elira blinked at him, still groggy, heart hammering. "Train? I can't fight like you," she whispered. Ravik's eyes softened briefly, but the gold in them remained sharp, warning her. You don't fight like me. You fight with the bond. Your instinct, your awareness, your connection to me and Bryn. That is your weapon. You've survived this far without understanding it. Now you'll learn to control it. Elira shivered, realizing the gravity of his words. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, shadows twisting between the trees like spectators waiting for something violent and inevitable. Ravik led her into a small clearing near Iron Fen Ridge, the terrain jagged with rocks and twisted roots. Focus, he said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. Elira inhaled, tasting the crisp morning air, trying to calm her racing pulse. Close your eyes, Ravik instructed. Feel me. Feel Bryn. Feel the rhythm between us. Elira obeyed, unsure what she would sense. Slowly, a warmth began in her chest, pulsing outward, reaching toward Ravik, toward Bryn. The bond, a strange electric tether, made the air hum. She felt his heartbeat, strong and steady, mingling with hers. Bryn stirred, yipping softly, tail wagging in response. Panic fluttered at the edges of her mind, but Ravik's presence grounded her. Good, he murmured. Now, move. Let the bond guide you. Elira opened her eyes and instinctively stepped forward, the forest around them sharpened in focus. She could hear the distant rustle of animals, feel the subtle shift of wind, even sense a shadow moving just beyond the tree line. It was frightening, exhilarating, and powerful. Suddenly, Caro Flint leapt from the shadows, claws extended, eyes blazing with hatred. Elira froze, Bryn squealing softly, but Ravik moved like lightning, intercepting the strike. Elira felt the bond surge violently, her body reacting before her mind could think. She ducked instinctively, Bryn safe in her arms, and felt the sharp pull of Ravik's awareness, guiding her away from danger. The forest itself seemed to bend around them, shadows shifting with every movement. Ravik landed beside her, chest heaving, eyes never leaving Caro. Use it, he growled. Elira's fear collided with adrenaline. She focused, letting the bond sharpen her senses. She could feel Caro's aggression, every heartbeat, every intention. She stepped forward, guided by instinct, and Bryn yipped, sensing her determination. Elira's fear transformed into something new, a flicker of control, a pulse of strength. The fight escalated, Caro circling, testing their defenses, but Elira, guided by the bond, moved with increasing confidence. Ravik attacked with lethal precision, but he never struck her. Every motion was a lesson, a tether, a dance of survival and unity. Elira realized amidst the chaos that she could anticipate Caro's movements, not because she was stronger, faster, or trained, but because the bond pulsed through her, sinking her with Ravik and Bryn. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat aligned. Caro growled, frustrated, striking with fury, but Ravik intercepted each attack, his golden eyes flicking to Elira to measure her understanding. She felt his pride, his concern, his something deeper, unspoken. The bond wasn't just survival. It was claim, connection, and undeniable pull. Elira's chest burned, her mind racing, but she was learning to trust it. Finally, Caro retreated, snarling into the shadows, claws scraping stone, leaving behind the echo of his fury. Elira's knees buckled as the adrenaline drained, but Ravik caught her before she fell, holding her close, golden eyes intense and searching. You did well, he said, voice low, almost intimate, a rare softness threading through the danger. Elira blinked, breath coming in ragged gasps. I did? She whispered. Ravik's lips twitched, a faint acknowledgement of approval, though his posture remained vigilant. Yes, but it's only the beginning. Caro will return. Others will test you. You must always be aware of the bond, of me. Of the pack. Elira nodded, pulse racing for reasons beyond fear. The bond pulsed warmly, and she realized, with a shiver, that it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about connection, protection, and a pull she couldn't escape. And as she looked into Ravik's golden gaze, she knew that the bond between them was no longer optional. It was destiny. That night the sanctuary hummed with quiet tension. Elira sat near the fire, Bryn asleep beside her, hands shaking from exhaustion and the weight of what she'd just experienced. Ravik moved silently, checking traps and surveying the perimeter, his presence constant. Elira realized she could feel him even when he wasn't looking, hear his heartbeat in sync with her own. The bond was stronger now, pulsing, alive, demanding recognition. She didn't know if she was ready for what lay ahead, but she understood one thing clearly. The bond was irreversible. Caro Flint would return, threats would continue, and survival depended on embracing what she could not deny. And for the first time, Elira understood that the pull toward Ravik Thornsent was no longer fear, no longer chance. It was inevitable. Night had swallowed Frostvale timberlands, leaving only the whispers of wind through the pines and the soft crackle of the sanctuary's hearth. Elira lay on a blanket near Bryn, eyes wide and restless, still feeling the pulse of the bond strong against her chest. Ravik moved silently across the floor, every muscle taut, senses straining against the shadows that pressed just beyond the walls. The forest hummed with expectation, each creak and rustle a reminder that danger never slept. Elira's hands trembled slightly as she traced Bryn's fur, heartbeat echoing in time with the pup's. Then a distant growl shivered through the night, low and deliberate, sending a chill down her spine. "Caro Flint," Ravik muttered under his breath, jaw tightening, eyes flashing gold in the dim firelight. Elira instinctively rose, heart hammering. "He's here?" she whispered. Ravik's gaze met hers, sharp and commanding. "He's testing us. And if we falter, he will strike." Before she could process, a crash shattered the fragile calm. The front wall of the sanctuary trembled under the weight of brute force. Caro Flint's snarling form appeared, claws scraping the timber, eyes burning with hatred. Ravik was on him in an instant, powerful and fluid, intercepting the strike with a force that reverberated through the floor. Elira's breath caught, Bryn yipping sharply, but something deep inside her responded. Not fear, but awareness. The bond pulsed, a fire coursing through her veins, and she felt Ravik's heartbeat, Bryn's tremble, and her own merging into one. She didn't understand it fully, but instinctively she moved, placing herself between Bryn and the threat. Every step, every glance, every slight motion she made synchronized with Ravik's defenses. She realized with shocking clarity that the bond was no longer passive. It was guiding her, shaping her decisions, enhancing her senses in ways that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Caro lunged again, faster this time, teeth bared, fury radiating from him in waves. Ravik intercepted with brutal precision, yet the Alpha's attention flicked repeatedly to Elira, ensuring she stayed safe. The bond pulsed violently in her chest, burning with an intensity that left her dizzy. Elira acted without thought, dodging, stepping aside, guiding Bryn out of harm's way, sensing Caro's movements before they fully materialized. Every instinct screamed at her, but it was more than instinct. It was connection. She understood, in fragments, the depth of the bond. They were linked, predator and protector, pup and mate, each heartbeat reinforcing the other. Bryn barked sharply, leaping from her arms, and Elira instinctively caught him mid-fall, feeling a surge of adrenaline she had never known. Her movements became sharper, faster, more confident, as if the bond had unlocked something dormant within her. Ravik, sensing her rising control, adjusted his own movements, guiding the flow of the battle. Together they became a seamless force. Ravik's strength, Elira's instinct guided by the bond, and Bryn's presence as the emotional anchor. Caro snarled, frustration and fury flashing across his features, realizing that their coordination exceeded his expectations. With a sudden, powerful leap, Ravik slammed Caro into the ground, pinning him beneath his weight. Elira, heart racing, knelt beside Bryn, watching as Ravik's golden eyes locked with hers. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stretch, charged with energy, fear, and something she could not yet name. Desire, perhaps, or the pull of destiny. The bond throbbed like a living thing, tying them together in a rhythm of survival, strength, and inevitability. Caro growled one last time before retreating, wounded and humiliated, disappearing into the misty forest. Elira sank to her knees, Bryn curled safely against her chest, shaking from fear and exhilaration. Ravik stood a moment longer, golden eyes sweeping the trees, then finally turned to her, expression softening for the first time since they met. "You survived," he said quietly, voice low but steady. Elira's voice trembled. We survived." Ravik's gaze lingered on hers, a silent acknowledgement of the bond pulsing stronger than ever. Elira realized with a shiver that she was no longer just a human caught in the forest. She was part of a world where instinct, survival, and connection were intertwined. A world where the alpha who had come to punish her was now undeniably, irrevocably linked to her. And as Ravik stepped closer, brushing a hand near hers, Elira understood that the danger was far from over. But so was the pull between them. The forest beyond the sanctuary was alive with tension, every leaf and branch trembling under the presence of predators. Elira's chest heaved, Bryn pressed against her shoulder, eyes wide with fear and understanding. Ravik stood before her, tall, golden eyes glinting in the pale moonlight that filtered through the dense canopy. His body radiated power and control, yet every inch of him vibrated with urgency. Elira felt the bond thrum violently in her chest, a living pulse that intertwined her fear, her determination, and an impossible draw toward him. "He's coming," Ravik murmured, voice low, almost intimate, the single syllable carrying both warning and command. Elira swallowed, hard, gripping Bryn tightly. She had never been more afraid, or more alive. The bond pulsed in response to Ravik's tension, guiding her thoughts, sharpening her senses, warning her of movement she could not yet see. And then the forest erupted with sound. Caro Flint lunged from the shadows with unmatched fury, claws extended, teeth bared, and eyes blazing with hatred. Ravik met him instantly, a blur of power, strength, and precision, intercepting the strike before it could reach Elira. But this time, the battle was different. Elira could feel Caro's aggression in her bones, hear it in her heartbeat, sense every predatory intention before it fully materialized. She moved instinctively, guided by the bond, positioning Bryn and herself safely, anticipating Caro's attacks in a fluid rhythm she had never known existed within her. Ravik's golden eyes flicked to hers, recognition flashing. She was ready. The bond pulsed between them, synchronizing movement, strength, and awareness. A living tether that transformed fear into focus. Elira realized she was no longer just surviving. She was fighting, connected, and capable. The clash intensified, Caro snapping with lethal precision, testing their defenses, but the combination of Ravik's raw power and Elira's bond-guided instinct was unstoppable. She could feel every shift in Ravik's muscles, every surge of strength, every warning heartbeat. Her own movements became an extension of his, a silent, dangerous choreography. Bryn barked sharply, darting between them, unafraid, sensing the rhythm of the battle as clearly as she did. Caro lunged again, faster than before, and Elira responded instantly, pulling Bryn to safety while sidestepping with uncanny precision. Her own pulse roared in her ears. every nerve alive with adrenaline and the electric pull of the bond. For the first time, fear and thrill were inseparable, woven together by instinct, connection, and the unbreakable thread tying her to Ravik. With a sudden surge of power, Ravik pinned Caro against a tree, golden eyes burning with fury and claim. Alira stepped closer, feeling the bond tighten, pulsing like a living heartbeat through her chest. "Now," Ravik whispered, low, commanding, and she understood. The bond guided her, not just instinctively, but deliberately. She stepped forward, hands steady, and connected fully with Ravik's pulse, the rhythm of their hearts, breaths, and presence entwining. Caro growled in frustration, thrashing beneath their combined focus, but Alira felt the surge of strength, the bond amplifying them both. She didn't need to strike. The synchronization, the unity, was enough. Caro's resistance faltered, the realization that he could not break the tether overwhelming him. With one final snarl, he slunk into the shadows. Defeated, humiliated, his threat ended for now. The forest seemed to exhale, tension dissipating like mist. Alira sank to her knees, Bryn pressed against her chest, trembling from exertion and relief. Ravik's hands brushed her hair gently, grounding her even as the bond pulsed strongly between them. The adrenaline faded, leaving a fragile calm. Alira's chest heaved, her pulse still racing in tandem with Ravik's. She looked up at him, golden eyes softened by exhaustion, and something deeper. Possessiveness, pride, and an undeniable longing. We, she whispered, words failing her. Ravik knelt beside her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, the other hovering near Bryn. "We survived," he said quietly, though his gaze held more than reassurance. Alira's fingers trembled, brushing against his. The bond throbbed with warmth, connection, and unspoken promises. She realized with a shiver that this fight had changed everything. She was no longer a human running from predators. She was part of this world, part of the Alpha who had once come to punish her. The pull between them was no longer something to resist. It was inevitable. In that moment, Alira understood that the bond was not just survival. It was claim, destiny, and the first breath of a love she could not deny. Ravik's eyes softened, the golden glow dimming slightly as he observed her. "Rest," he said, voice low but firm. "You've learned the first lesson. The bond is stronger than fear, stronger than any enemy. It is survival. It is trust. It is us." Alira exhaled shakily, holding Bryn tightly, letting the warmth of the Alpha beside her seep into her bones. The forest outside was quiet now, shadows receding into the night, yet the bond pulsed between them, a constant rhythm, a tether that could not be broken. Alira realized, with a thrill and a chill, that nothing would ever be the same again. Caro Flint had been defeated for now, but the forest, the pack, and the bond were eternal. And with Ravik by her side, she felt a courage and connection she had never imagined possible. She was claimed, she was bound, and she was ready. The first light of dawn spilled gently over Frostvale timberlands, painting the forest in hues of gold and silver. The air smelled of pine, wet earth, and something sharper. Wildness and freedom mingled with warmth. Alira stirred from a restless sleep, Bryn curled against her chest, soft and trusting. Ravik was already awake, standing near the sanctuary's entrance, golden eyes scanning the horizon. There was no tension in the air now, no immediate threat. Caro Flint had retreated into the shadows, his challenge finally broken, and the forest seemed to acknowledge their victory. Alira's chest felt lighter, yet the bond pulsed steadily, a living rhythm that wrapped around her and Ravik like an invisible tether. She realized with awe and an unexpected thrill that she was no longer just human, no longer just a frightened caretaker of a pup. She was part of something greater, woven into a web of survival, loyalty, and an unbreakable connection with the Alpha who had once come to punish her. Ravik turned, eyes softening as he watched her rise, Bryn stretching at her feet. "You've changed," he said quietly, voice low but edged with pride. Elira met his gaze, feeling the warmth of the bond like a pulse beneath her skin. I think I understand it now," she admitted, voice trembling. "The bond, it's not just about survival. It's everything." Ravik stepped closer, powerful and magnetic, golden eyes studying hers, chest rising and falling in a rhythm that matched hers. "Everything," he confirmed. He extended a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle, yet commanding. Elira felt a shiver run through her, the pulse of the bond making her aware of every heartbeat, every subtle shift between them. She realized fully that she could not, and did not want to, resist him. The connection was no longer dangerous. It was home, and claim, and something she had always been missing without knowing it. Bryn yipped softly, tail wagging, and Elira bent to scoop him up. Ravik's eyes followed, lingering on her hands as they cradled the pup, the gesture simple, but charged with unspoken emotion. "He trusts you," Ravik said, voice low, almost reverent. "As do I." Elira blinked, the words hitting her harder than she expected. Trust, claim, bond, fate. All intertwined, all pulsing through her in waves she could no longer resist. She placed Bryn down on the soft forest floor, then took a careful step toward Ravik. The bond hummed between them, vibrating with every breath and heartbeat. She didn't have to speak. The pull was undeniable, the energy between them electric and overwhelming. With a careful, almost trembling hand, she reached for him. Ravik closed the distance instantly, golden eyes locking with hers, energy swirling like fire and shadow. They stood in silence, the world around them still, shadows retreating in the early morning light, forest creatures stirring, birds calling from the canopy above. Elira felt her heart hammer against hers, Bryn yipping softly at her side, sensing the monumental moment. Ravik's hand covered hers, strong, possessive, yet gentle, the pulse of the bond threading through every nerve. "You're mine," he whispered, voice low and certain. "And I am yours. No one can change that." Elira's breath caught, emotions crashing over her, fear, relief, wonder, and a sudden, impossible joy. "Yours," she repeated softly, realizing the word felt like destiny, like a key unlocking a part of her she hadn't known existed. Bryn barked lightly, as if in agreement, and the bond pulsed around them, strong, unbreakable, alive. Elira understood that this moment wasn't just survival or victory. It was culmination, choice, and fate intertwined. The Alpha who had come to punish her now stood as her protector, her equal, her claim. And she had chosen him, just as fate had chosen them. The sun rose higher, spilling warmth across the sanctuary and the surrounding forest. Elira and Ravik stood side by side, hands still linked, Bryn nestled at their feet, the bond between them a living, vibrating presence that neither fear, distance, nor shadow could sever. Caro Flint and all threats were behind them now, irrelevant against the unity and power they shared. Elira realized fully that the forest, the Alpha and the bond, had changed her forever. She was no longer a mere human caught in danger. She was part of the pack, part of the rhythm, part of a love and claim that transcended fear and instinct. Ravik leaned close, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, lips hovering near her temple, warm and intimate. Elira closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in, knowing that every heartbeat, every shiver, every pulse of the bond had led to this inevitable, breathtaking, and complete union. They were bound, protected, and claimed. The forest hummed quietly around them, bearing witness to a love forged in danger, destiny, and fire. As the day fully dawned, Elira felt a serene certainty settle over her. She was no longer the frightened human who had stumbled into a world of predators. She was part of something primal and eternal, entwined with Ravik Thornsent through fate, bond, and unbreakable connection. Bryn yipped one last time, a small, joyful sound, and Elira laughed softly, a sound of release, relief, and joy. Ravik's golden eyes softened as he stepped closer, the bond thrumming around them like a heartbeat shared between three lives. She leaned into him, sensing the weight, warmth, and power of the alpha who had come to punish her, and had found instead his fated mate. The forest stretched endlessly beyond the sanctuary, shadows shrinking in the growing light, yet the bond, the claim, and the love they shared remained unshakable, eternal, and unstoppable. Fate had claimed them both, and for the first time, Elira knew she had found her home, her strength, and her heart. Wow, what a journey! Elira, Ravik, and little Bryn have survived danger, embraced destiny, and discovered a bond that can't be broken. If your heart was racing and you felt the pull of their connection, then you know this story is just the beginning of their world. Don't forget to like this video if you love the suspense and romance, and subscribe to join me for more thrilling, heart-pounding stories of love, danger, and destiny. I want to hear from you. Comment below with which character captured your heart the most, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Are you in a quiet room under the stars or sneaking this in during your day? I have to know. If you can't get enough of pack drama, forbidden love, and fierce alphas, check out the playlist right here. Insert playlist link for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your fate is calling, and so is your next adventure.